yes. Please sit down, Baroness Scotland. What a journey you have been on. What a journey. Now, you left the Caribbean when you were 2 years old. Mm-hmm. Now, the most important question I think I have to ask you about that is, why did your parents choose Walthamstow?
I think they chose Walthamstow because it was somewhere where they could actually buy a house.
Right, okay. Not the case anymore.
Because as you can imagine, some people in this room are as old as me, but very few. And you may remember that in the 1950s, London wasn't as it is now. You still had signs which said, no dogs, no Irish, and no colours. And it was really quite tough if you had a small family like mine. I'm one of my parents' 12 only children. So 12 only children. Yeah. I'm their 10th only child.
So you were the substitute in the football team then, were you? I take
Exactly.
it, yes.
So there were 10 of us when we first came, and it was quite hard to find somewhere where someone would sell you a house and one that was big enough for all the children to live in. So Walthamstow was where we went, and when we arrived in Walthamstow, there weren't any other black people there. So we were literally the first family. And because there were so many of us, if we went down the road, someone would say, "You're a Scotland, aren't you?" And I'd say, "Yeah, got it absolutely right." So there were 7 boys and 5 girls.
What are your earliest memories of growing up in London?
My earliest memories, I think, is of laughter and singing, because my parents have a mixed marriage,
yes,
in as much my father's an Antiguan Methodist,
right,
and my mother's a Dominican Catholic. So that's the sort of mixed marriage that they had. And when we first came to the United Kingdom, we went to the Sally Army, Salvation Army, and who were great at singing. And so one of my first memories is going to the Salvation Army, and it was warm and fun and kind and really quite loving.
How did you, as a child with so many siblings, how did you find your individuality in that setting?
Well, I think it's because my parents were really clear. They said to us that every single one of us was given a talent, and it was a gift from God. And it was our job to find that talent, to hone it, and to then use it for other people. And that none of us were like anyone else. And therefore, we needed to know that we individually were special, and that what we had was not necessarily going to be what anyone else had. So as a result, in fact, every single one of my brothers and sisters, we all chose different fields. And I think it's because everybody wanted to be the top dog of that field. So if one of us was, biochemist, pharmacologist, and the other one was an agronomist, then you needed to find a different field.
Amazing. When were you first made conscious of your colour in a perhaps negative context? Through racism or through bullying, through prejudice?
I think it was probably when I very first went to school. And it's my parents insisted that we spoke what my father called Queen's English. So
that must have fitted it very well in Walthamstow, yeah, I can imagine at the time.
So as you can imagine, going to school for the first time was an interesting experience because everyone in my house spoke like me. But when I went to school, they didn't speak like that. And I remember coming home from school the very first day when I was 5, and my parents saying to me, my mother saying to me, "So, how was it?" And I must have looked really like, wow. And she said, "No, what is it?" And I said, "Well, the thing is, they don't speak English." Because I went to school, and those of you who know the East End will know they speak like this. So what I'll say now, do you know what I mean? Because it's a bit difficult. And I'll tell you. So I couldn't understand what they were talking about, actually. So
wow. I just thought I was just next to Peggy Mitchell for a moment there. That was amazing.
So it was really tough. So I spent the first month going, yeah, and I didn't understand a word. But, after a while, I did. You know, I can still do it now. Actually, I remember a really funny time when I was about 10 and there was a new girl came to the school, and I speak as I speak now to her. And one of my best friends at that time, this new girl turned to her and said, "Here, have you heard her? She says she's got an hot potato in her mouth." And my friend Sharon said, "Yeah, I know, but she can't help it." So it was, you know, a different thing. But actually, when I was really small, I used to get beaten up at school.
So how would you describe your childhood and your schooling? Happy, challenging? How did it mold you into the person that you are today?
I think it made me resilient. And I was incredibly lucky that I had all my siblings. Because when I was...
That's quite a gang, right?
Yeah. And we really liked cricket, so we were a phenomenal team. My brothers and sisters were really supportive to me, and quite often they'd take me, my brothers, who I adore. I grew up with my 7 brothers and my father, and I thought men were the most wonderful people in the world, kind and funny and warm and clever.
We are. Until you marry us, we are all of those things.
and I adored them. So my brothers used to take me to school, but sometimes they didn't. And on the days when they didn't was the days I'd get beaten up. So, which was quite a challenge. But you became resilient, because every time I went home and I would be crying about this happening to me or that happening to me, there'd always be someone, you know that script where it says, you're in a pit and they say, luxury, luxury. Well, that was what my brothers and sisters, I'd go home and I'd be complaining about some bit of racism or being beaten, and they'd say, that's nothing, just remember what they did to me. So I think having my family gave me a great resilience, because my family believed in me. And all my brothers and sisters had had a similar experience. So they were my role models.
Why the law?
Because I was one of those why birds who was always saying that things were unfair, and why not this and why not that. And it was very, very important to me. Fairness and justice was always very important to me. And I remember the first time I thought of it was when I was watching television. I was really small, and I saw Soweto in South Africa, and there were children who looked just like me, and they were being shot at and stoned. And I remember saying to my father, you know, this is just not right. Daddy, look at what is happening. Surely we have to do something about this. And I'll never forget, my father said, yes, you're absolutely right, my daughter. And I thought, it's great, my daddy agrees with me. And then he said something to me that I'll never, ever forget. He said, so, my child, what are you going to do about it? I thought, me, I'm 6. You know, the girl with the plaits and the socks. And then he said, and your point is, starts with you. The decisions that you make and you choose to make can make a difference. And that was the day, because I loved fruit, that I decided that I would never eat another piece of South African fruit until South Africa was free. I just didn't know it would take so long, because I would have chosen something else.
You were called to the bar in 1977, is that right?
Yep.
I mean, that is extraordinary for a woman born in the Caribbean, a black woman, to be called to the bar. You know, the legal establishment, the heart of it. State school,
Yep.
not Oxbridge.
Yep.
What was that like, walking through those doors and having your head held high, knowing that there's a lot of people there? Because, 1977, we're talking the establishment ruled it. They're not far off ruling it still, but I mean, then it must have been extraordinary.
No, I'd finished my degree at 20. I got my law degree at 20, and I was qualified as a barrister at 21.
Can we have a round of applause for that? That is extraordinary, isn't it? Called to the bar at 21 years ago.
And at that time, there was only 7% of the Bar of England and Wales which were women. And of that 7%, about 0.01% were black. And so when I went to the bar, I was basically told that the pecking order was white male, black male, white female, and then there was me. So I think there was very little expectation that you would succeed. And I was fine with that. I just wasn't fine with not trying. I was absolutely up for failing if that was what was going to happen. But I wasn't going to step away without giving it a go. And I was brought up to believe there is no disgrace in failing. The only disgrace is in not having tried. So I owed it to myself to try.
This is why we're here this evening, Baroness Scotland, leadership. In 1991, you became the UK's first black female QC. Tell me about that experience of being told that.
Well, it was a surprise, in as much as I was only 35 years of age, and I think I was the youngest Silk since Pitt the Younger. And
that's quite a gap in time.
Yeah, but he cheated because he became Prime Minister.
Right.
And it was only an honorary Silk.
Right, okay.
But I was 35, and I think I was the first black woman to be appointed as a Silk in the United Kingdom. And I think there was a lot of expectation. And I remember people saying that you were a role model. And I thought, I'm not a role model for anything. I've just worked and done the best I could. And then I realized subsequently, it was a very humbling moment. I was really very shy about not wanting to be in the public eye, and I was just doing a job, and it felt quite uncomfortable. And I was walking along the road, and there was a really wonderful Jamaican gentleman who was about 5'6", and maybe then in his 60s, with a little pork pie hat that quite often men of his generation wore. He lifted his hat and he said, he asked me if I was Baroness Patricia Scotland, and I thought I'd lie, like say no. But I eventually said, yes, I am. And he said, Madam, I have to tell you, the day you took Silk, I felt 6 foot tall. Yeah. And that was humbling.
And 6 years later, you become Attorney General.
Well, not quite so quickly.
Well,
because I became a Silk in 1991.
Yeah.
And then in 1997, I went to the House of Lords.
House of Lords, sorry.
Yep.
And then in 2007,
I became
Attorney General.
Yeah.
I mean, tell me what it is. When you look back on all of these glass ceilings that you have just destroyed, what is it that is within you that keeps being able to just push and push and push?
For me, and other people have different things, I have always been a woman of faith my whole life. And I believe that that which I have done has been by the grace of God. And I also think that what resonates with me always is what my parents drummed into me, that everyone does have a talent, but that your talent isn't for you. Your talent is to try and help things to be a bit better for other people. It's this idea of service. And I think if you are obsessed with making your career and achieving things for you, that tends to be a monkey on your back, a bit of a burden. And I think that people tend, unfortunately, in my experience, to fall into 2 categories. Those people who want to be someone, and those people who want to do something. And what I've found is I've always been wrapped up in trying to do something. And whilst doing something, I've ended up becoming someone. But it was the doing that was more important and not the being. And I think sometimes if you are focused on becoming this thing, you get in your own way, because your obsession is, I want to do X, and you end up saying, but why? Why do you want to do this? What do you want to do with it? And so many people say, I just want to be. I don't want to do, I just want to be. And I can understand that, but I've always been so wrapped up in doing that I've ended up being. Sometimes that's not necessarily what you want to do, but you end up doing it.
When you see a barrier in front of you, what is your first instinct?
Probably not to see it, because I think we are often our own barriers, and quite often we think about the fact that we can't do this. And most of us are thinking, a bit like Groucho Marx, we wouldn't be a member of any club who'd have us, and we're our own worst critics. And I think that it comes back to thinking about the objective. So, for example, I've always been passionate about ending violence against women and girls, which is the greatest cause of morbidity worldwide. It affects 1 in 3 women and girls. So my focus has been, how do we change that? How do we eliminate that? What do we have to do? How do we work together to bring it to an end? And if you're constantly thinking about how can I make this better, my father used to say that you have to try and leave this world with it being a tiny bit better for you having lived in it. And that if you can't do that, then at least don't do it any harm. So I suppose what I look at is not whether there is a barrier. I think about what I want to do and how I can deliver that for and with other people. And I tend to get so consumed in the doing that I don't quite notice the barriers, because I've lived with the fact that everybody says I shouldn't exist. I shouldn't do any of the things. I'm black, I'm female, I'm a devout Catholic, I'm a socialist, I didn't go to Oxbridge, I wasn't public school educated, and so I am an anomaly. And I don't fit into any other category. And maybe that's helped me, because being who I wasn't going to help me if I wanted to be a cleaner. If I wanted to be a cleaner, I'd still be at the bottom of the list. So why not aspire to that? Why not do something else?
Well, in April of this year, you became not only the first British person, but the first woman to be Commonwealth Secretary General of 52 states, of course, of the Commonwealth. What are the Commonwealth's biggest challenges, do you think, Baroness Scotland? Because it is a disparate group of people with different ideas and different cultures, and you, of course, come from it.
Well, I think I am the classic Commonwealth citizen, because I'm Dominican and British. I was born in this small but very beautiful island of Dominica, where I have gone backwards and forwards throughout my life, and I still speak my own country's language. It's very similar to many expat countries, citizens, that when you go through that door, you go back home. And
Are you talking about Walthamstow again?
Yeah, both.
Yeah, right.
Dominica and Walthamstow. And outside so I am an amalgam, and the Commonwealth is amalgam. The Commonwealth has, some people say 2.3 billion, and some say 2.5 billion people. We represent 1/3 of the world, and about 1.3 billion people in the Commonwealth are Indians. So we have 5 different regions. We have Asia, Africa, Caribbean, Pacific, and Europe. And those 5 regions encompass all the complexity and the wonders of our world's population. You'll see the world's faces reflected in the faces of the Commonwealth people. And this is a real family. We all speak the same language and communicate in English. We share the same common law. We have the same institutions, parliamentary democracies. And that nexus really binds us together. And if you look at what we've achieved with the Commonwealth Charter, those 16 clauses reflect the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Why were we able to come together? And it took us 2 years, 3 months, and 11 days, because we listen to each other, the small, the big, the landlocked and the islands. So I think the Commonwealth is the future. I think the Queen said that about 7 years ago, and she was prescient. Because if you look at where we're going, particularly after Brexit, there has never been a more important place for all the religions, all the peoples of the Commonwealth.
Have you had lunch with Liam Fox yet?
I did have that yesterday, and it was a stimulating experience.
I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was. One last question. England playing the West Indies at cricket. Who do you support?
Now, that's a really terrible question. And I think I'm going to take the fifth. But
ladies and gentlemen, the very inspiring Baroness Patricia Scotland. Amazing. Amazing. We must do this on the radio. We must do this on the radio.